Okay.
All right. Welcome everybody to today's coffee break. I'm Harry Box. Just want to quickly thank our sponsors, um, Arri, Astera, Duclos Lenses, Lightgear, Panavision, and Taylor & Taylor. These are the companies that make events like this possible. And they've continued to support PERG through some difficult times, and we appreciate it. Okay, so before we get to today's event, I just want to take this opportunity to announce a couple of events we have coming up: the Spring Mixer and the Rental House Breakfast at Cine Gear. I'll put some details in the chat. I just want to also mention, since we're here talking about COIs today, people have changed their staff over the course of the last couple of years, and people may not be registered for rental guard. So I want to encourage people to think about who at their company is getting these alerts. With that, let's turn to today's coffee break. Red flags on COIs and best practices for customer vetting. We're delighted to have three great presenters with us today. Scott Taylor, the man who needs no introduction, president of Taylor & Taylor Associates. And with him, Amy Saenz, the claims manager at Taylor & Taylor Associates, and Glen Hallahan, who's a claims and adjustments consultant and a contractor at Hallahan Group, Inc. So each one of them will have a little bit of a presentation. After all three presentations are over, we'll open it up for your question and answer.
Good morning. Thank you, Harry. I'd like to thank everybody for coming to this coffee break. The goal here today is to have rental companies hyper-focused on those situations where you have people that are intending to steal equipment from you. Throughout my career, the methods of theft have changed, but the result is still the same. The rental house ends up losing their equipment. When I first started, the scheme to steal was for people to follow trucks from equipment rental houses, wait for the truck to be unattended, and then break into the vehicle. I think there was one guy in New York City who made a career of it for 10 years. And at some point in time, he was finally arrested. Then the approach changed to customers buying insurance, whether it be short-term insurance or annual insurance. And what they would do is rent the gear and just abscond with the equipment, never to return it. I think that became a more reliable approach to stealing equipment than the haphazard approach of following trucks and not necessarily knowing what was inside. So it led me to believe that basically there's an order of what equipment people want to buy, knowing that it's stolen. The approach has changed again more recently, where people would buy insurance, they would rent the gear, and then they would say that the equipment was stolen from them while it was out on rental. That is a much harder case to prove, right? If it happens once, how do you argue with it? But when the same thing happens to the same people 10 times over, then it starts to look nefarious. More recently, and the reason for this coffee break, and what is, got a 5-alarm fire bell ringing in my head, is that people are creating fake certificates of insurance. Not only are they creating fake certificates of insurance, they're creating fake insurance broker websites. They're creating fake websites of production companies that once existed. So when you call the phone number on the certificate of insurance, you're really calling the person who is intending to steal the equipment from you. If you go and you Google the website, the first one that's going to pop up is the one that they created. So no longer can you really rely on those two methods of vetting whether that insurance certificate is real or not real. There was even one instance where they had a real certificate of insurance and they just changed the phone number and the email address. And once again, the confirmation was coming from somebody who was going to steal the gear. One of the things that occurred to me more recently, and I didn't realize that you could do it very easily, is I got a telephone call from JP Morgan, which happens to be our bank, to vet one of my account numbers and to say that there was a fraud alert on that account. And I happen to have a lot of account numbers at JP Morgan. I said, okay, which number are you calling about? And the person hung up. So when you get caller ID on your telephone and it looks like it's coming from your customer, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is. People are giving fake references, right? There are two situations where police reports were made where equipment had been stolen from the renter. And those photographs, it was the same photograph, had been downloaded off the internet. So your head should be spinning at this point and saying, how do I stop this from happening to me? And the only answer that really, or the only two answers that really exist is you have to know the people that are renting from you. Either you have to know them through an industry reference, through a crew member that's going to work from them, from a prior rental, or, if you can't get to the status of a known customer, you're going to have to reach out to some third party who could vet the information that's being given to you. One of the websites had been created just before the fake certificate of insurance was created. It was created for the specific purpose of misleading the rental house. Most people that are going to vet certificates of insurance at equipment rental houses are not equipped to figure out when those websites were created. So hence the reason why we brought Glen into the equation, because his firm is a private investigator firm, and they could at least help a rental house determine whether their customer is real or not real. It's almost as important to vet whether the customer is real as the information that exists on the certificate of insurance. Over my career, most of the rent to steal schemes seem to be isolated, although it's not, a guarantee that it's restricted to the short-term equipment rental. But we haven't been seeing those types of thefts when dealing with episodic television or feature films or documentaries, which are longer format. It may be that the equipment checkout at the rental house is for a greater number of days, and there's more interaction where somebody might notice that this person has no clue of what they're doing with this gear, or what they've rented doesn't go with some of the other items that they've rented. More recently, after the NAB meeting, first time I had ever heard of it, there was a change in the delivery instructions for where equipment was to go. It wasn't for motion picture equipment that was rented, was for equipment that was bought and sold. And what it got me to thinking, I've seen those schemes every day, and we're all aware of them in terms of email, where we get an email saying, I changed my banking, information. Don't send your wire to here, send it to this account, right? It's the first time I'd ever seen it from a property perspective. So the advice I've always given to anybody when they get those emails is to call the person who's sent you a request on a known telephone number, not the telephone number on the email, asking to change the wiring instructions and the banking information. Confirm the new banking information verbally over the telephone. If you're going to send a large sum of money, send $1 first to make sure it's going to where you intend it to go. The same procedure now has to be followed, right? In the event, a customer has gear out on rental and they're asking you to ship equipment to that location. I know of one instance where equipment was sent to an abandoned building, and obviously the people just waited and picked up the gear. So, some things that the rental house can do on their own without, using a private investigator is they could use Rental Guard. Rental Guard is a great resource for people in your industry. Basically, the missing equipment reports are free of charge. But by signing up for those missing equipment reports, you will see the same people stealing the equipment over and over and over again, right? It will be the same names, same fact patterns. For those that choose to be a member of the production equipment rental group, there are two other functions. One is the suspicious customer alert, where you could send out an email blast to other people, letting them know you had somebody trying to rent from you and you were suspicious of that person. And you could also ask for a customer reference. One of the other things individuals can do is you could go, there's a program where you could look at insurance broker websites, customer websites, and you could see when they were created, right? One of the other things you could do is most rental houses have an abundance of certificates of insurance that were issued by brokers. You could look to see if the certificate of insurance looks close or similar to those other certificates. And in many instances, in the one instance where they changed the email address and the phone number, you could find another certificate of insurance from that same broker and verify the information that way. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Harry. We're going to hold off questions until the end. You could put them into the chat because we want everybody to get through their presentations. We also have everybody currently on mute because we don't want this to turn into a complaint fest about any specific insurance carrier, any specific insurance broker, because we're all in this together. We want everybody pulling in the same direction as to how to prevent these rent to steals from happening. One last point, the fee for Glen's services or the services of his firm is $99 to vet the information that appears on a new customer application. And what I thought was a great idea is on your new application, you could put that we are going to vet this information by an independent third party. We're going to charge you a $99 fee for this service upfront when you open up a new account with us. And when you do your first rental, we will give you a credit for that $99. So it will not have cost you anything. The goal here is with the people that are intending bad things to happen, the hope is that they will just move on and not rent from you. The people that really intend to rent from you, it really didn't cost them anything. Somebody put up on the chat, social media is another good tool to use. And I had thought of that. If they don't have social media, they're not a real company. But much in the way that they've stolen the photographs of vehicles where they broke into them, they could probably steal social media as well. These people are very creative, and the goal, which is what I said when people are breaking into your company, is to put as many hurdles in between them and the gear. The same thing is, when with these certificates of insurance and vetting the customer, you just have to put a bunch of hurdles in the way where you make it more difficult to steal from you than from the next company. Not that you want to direct them to your competitors at all. With that, again, I'll hand it over to Harry.
All right. Yeah. Thanks. Thanks, Scott. So I'm just going to share real quick. I think most people are probably familiar with the Rental Guard website. Just in case you're not, this is if you had a theft, you could report it here. The serial numbers are then available to law enforcement who knows about this app. They carry it on their phone and they can check if they come across the equipment. They can check the other part of this that's very helpful is the watch list. So this is a list of all the names of people that have rented and not returned. It's also there's names on here that we get from law enforcement, and they're not necessarily real names; they're possibly aliases and alias companies. And this list is also populated with the results of a questionable customer alerts. So these people aren't necessarily criminals, but they have submitted requests that seem very suspicious. So other than the watch list, and if for members, you've got, as Scott already told us about, the new customer inquiry, the questionable customer alert. You can report stolen equipment here. You can search if you're buying used equipment. You always want to search this database. Put the serial number in, and if it pops up on here, then it's been reported stolen by somebody else. So if there's any questions about rental guard, we can talk about them at the end, but I want to hand it over to the real presenters here. Who am I handing it to? Amy or Glenn? Okay, I'll hand it over to you. Who's going next? So someone needs to unmute themselves. Oh. Hold on a second. Hold on, Glenn. That's hilarious. You should get a notice. There you go.
Okay.
Sorry, Glenn.
Yes, I was an audio prisoner, but I'm free. All right, so I lost you. All right, so I thank you for this opportunity. I'm going to go ahead and share my website with this on the backdrop here. So we are a private investigation company in New York, and we've worked with several insurance carriers over the years, investigating these types of fraud. So what happens though is we get them after the fact, after the property's gone. I assume everyone could hear me. So we get it after the fact, and in looking back, almost always someone was suspicious of some of the conduct ahead of the time. So in that case, we'd ask you to contact us. If you're suspicious, if this is a new client you've never dealt with, and you want to vet this, and Scotty giving you a little approach to how you could go ahead and bill our fee into your client. But again, if this person is up to no good, they might just back away completely when they realize that they're paying a fee to be vetted. So the question, of course, is, well, can I vet them myself? And the answer is you could. If you have the ability, if you have the access to the databases, if you have that discerning eye that's going to pick up on what to look for and what's going to pop out. What we'd ask of you, and I'm going to just go into my investigative services and submit a new case. Let's see. So if you go into our site, you would go here, and we are set up for insurance carriers to refer jobs to us. We have not developed a page dedicated to this line of work quite yet. If this is going to start happening regularly, we'll go ahead and make a page specifically for this. In the meanwhile, you could list your person, your renter, as the claimant for the purpose of my form, and put in whatever information you have that's available on the person that's renting. Down below, you have an option to choose a file, and that will bring you to back to your folders. Ideally, you could select the documents that have been sent to you. Ideally, his or her identification, certificate of insurance. If you can give me a credit card number, I don't need the CVC code. I don't need the expiration date, just a number. Or if there was an ACH transmission as well, the information on that, the phone number, whatever you have. And what we'll do is we will, of course, run all of that information and compare it to what you gave us, to what should come back. And we'll make calls as necessary to insurance carriers and other people that could assist us in vetting this person and make sure they didn't come to you to steal this. Today's criminals are very, very clever, as many of you know and have experience with. Just give you an idea, we have a product here called Spoof Phone. On Spoof Phone, I could go ahead and put in there the name I want to appear when I call you and the number that I want to appear. So I could put down, FBI and Agent Jones. I could put down whatever presentation I want, so that when you get that call, that's what comes up. And that would contribute to your belief in this person's ruse. So, just to give you an idea, now we also see that we talked about websites that have been mirrored, COIs that are false, have been fabricated or altered. So we're gonna go through those and we're gonna respond to you. In most cases, we're going to tell you we give it a green light or we don't give it a green light. In some cases, we could probably say highly suspicious or pretty suspicious. But if you have a suspicion to begin with, we want you to also voice that to us when you refer the job. So I showed you the website, hginy.com is how you access it. We're called the Hallahan Group, and you could submit it under new cases for investigation or surveillance, unless you go ahead and make up a new form. But you could also email us directly if that's easier for you. And that email would be info@hginy.com. I'll say that again, info@hginy, as in Hallahan Group Investigators New York.com. And although we're in New York, our database and our access to an investigation is anywhere in the US. I imagine what could be a little challenging for us is if you have a company who has no background in the US, they're from another country, that could be a little more challenging. And immediately, I would certainly flag that for investigation. We'll probably have to make some calls and really verify what we have there. Our goal also is to get you a response as soon as possible. I know you want to get the equipment out. So we'll try to get you a response. If it's a business day, we'll try to get your response that day if possible. If not, it'd be a one-day turnaround, ideally. In speaking with Amy and Scott prior to this, I understand that a certain amount of these bad guys have come to the rental houses on like a Friday afternoon at like 5 o'clock with this, big rental. So it's a potential sale at 5 p.m. And we're now scrambling to try to get this rental out for the weekend. I'd be cautious of responding or to make that rental under the pressure of the new business, particularly if you don't know this person, you have some suspicion. Those cases, you'd be right to be, ripped off. So, that's it in a nutshell. I could go through and explain what we will do, but in the end, we're going to do an investigation. That's who we are. That's what we've done. We've been in business here in the Hallahan Group for 18 years. And then I have 21 years prior experience in investigations. So we've been doing investigations for a while, and we have the ability to pick up on these things and to get you an answer right off the bat. Naturally, you could go to a company that you prefer, no obligation, or you could do it yourself. And the only risk there is that you're missing something that we're not. I just want to review my notes real quickly and make sure I covered the things I wanted to talk about. Yeah, so just to reiterate, we're going to be looking at a lot of comparisons of what they provided you and what they should have given you. So if you give me their phone number and tell me their phone number is, whatever area code and number, and I run that number and it belongs to a different person than your renter, I have some suspicion. So I'm going to go through all the data submitted to you. And there's a lot of data on the COI and on the rental agreement. And I'm going to compare that and get back to you and say, I don't like this at all. You just bear in mind, there are people that sit behind computers all day long with phones and computers and just make attempts at stealing money, property, whatever it could be. So we want to be cautious of those. If they're offering to pick up on a courier service, it's another level of suspicion. And naturally, it's big in this business, and people do send couriers. But these are the types of things we want to look at ahead of time because they don't want to put a face behind the pickup. I've had cases where they've asked TaskRabbit to deliver the equipment. TaskRabbit gets to the location. They direct the guy from TaskRabbit to leave the equipment behind the tree in the park. Just hide it behind the tree. And he does $150,000 worth of equipment. So this stuff goes on. So be cautious of courier service as well. So in a nutshell, that's what we do. That's our access information. Our phone information, 516-208-5476. I'll give that again, 208-5476. And we'll go ahead and start a case. We're going to access a lot of databases when doing this. That is something that we're privy to as a licensed private investigation firm. We have access to DMV. We have access to databases and a lot of information that the general public is not entitled to. So it's another reason that I would recommend you go with a professional service, such as ours. With that, I will pass it over to Amy. I believe she's going to speak and, of course, available for questions when they come up at the end. Thank you for your time and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Glenn. Good morning,
You're
good
welcome.
afternoon, everyone. As you know, I'm the claims manager at Taylor & Taylor. Hopefully not all of you have had to talk to me or exchange information with me too often, but my background is claims adjusting at Chubb Insurance. And during that time, I did work with Glenn on some cases, echoing his comments, Scott's comments. Ideally, you're going to engage Glenn's firm up front to prevent something like an investigation from happening after the equipment's been stolen. It's often the fact that if Glenn's trying to track down the perpetrators, the equipment, if someone has used a stolen identity or they ship the gear overseas, the recovery is very unlikely. So the other factor that I'd like to discuss in regards to these thefts would be police departments across the country. They're lacking the resources to really devote time and effort to these cases. For instance, last year we had identified a case in New York of stolen equipment with the same perpetrator as some cases in California. Even with detectives assigned on each coast, we were unable to engage the two parties to work together. And so it can be rather frustrating, time-wise, resource-wise. These are not going to take precedence over other law enforcement matters, unfortunately. And then also one thing that a lot of you have encountered when you've tried to file police reports in the events of these thefts, the authorities are going to tell you, well, this is a contract dispute. Sorry, we're not going to take a report. After multiple attempts, you may be successful because usually the insurance carriers are going to require that you have a police report in order to pursue the claim for the stolen gear. So again, just focusing on your time and efforts to report these after the fact versus taking this approach with really vetting these new potential customers. Another thing I wanted to mention that hasn't come up yet are air tags. I know we've had a few instances where clients have informed me they used air tags, they put them in the cases. Well, these renters who are renting with the intent to steal, they're aware of air tags and they'll leave them in an Uber or somewhere else to throw off the track of you or the authorities. And then when Scott mentioned the photos from the internet, I did see those photos, two different claim reports that I was filing. One was for a New York theft and the other was for a theft in Texas. And in both cases, these were new customers rented with the intent to steal. Unfortunately, they then used these photos of a car window that was smashed, reported it to the police, and then the claim was filed under the rental house's insurance policy because those renters were long gone. And I think your best defense truly is vetting these customers. I know now we've said it many times in this presentation, but it truly is worth the extra time. And in the case of Glen services, as Scott mentioned, you can charge the $99 up front and then entice them, with the credit towards the rental. And I think that would be a good way to immediately turn away those with the wrong intentions. Now, as far as the COIs, Scott has put a sample up here that we can talk through a bit. If you keep a valid certificate handy as a point of reference when you receive a new customer's certificate of insurance, you can perhaps just give a quick glance, compare them, right? So here what we've done is we've just crossed out the information that, you know, we're trying to protect the innocent, if you will. But take a look at the highlighted areas. You'll see you have your commercial general liability there on the left side in that column A and the policy number. Then all the way to the right, where you should not see rented equipment, you see rented equipment with a value. You should not see that under the general liability section of a cert. And then down below, you can also see that's repeated information, but with a different limit. And you see the same policy number. So typically, if you have different types of policies, you will see more than one policy number on the cert. And then down below in the description of operations, you can see where it says, it again references that policy number as additional insured loss payee under this policy. We have seen some instances where it will say something like insured for actual cash value and replacement cost. It will not have that kind of language in that description. And here's another example. This one I actually thought was kind of funny, but not in the fact that we had a claim come out of it, but we had Luke Walker, and then his email address was Luke Sky 1919. I thought that was interesting. As you see here, I highlighted in the location of premises section there, worldwide coverage. It says, you know, it lists all these very specific types of equipment and dance equipment. That's a little unusual. And then when you look down below, I have highlighted under the policy effective, the time is 5:47 p.m. That is absolutely a red flag. And then the next highlighted field, you'll see it's coverage based on replacement cost or actual cost basis. That would be another red flag. And this one is another one where you have the rented equipment showing in the commercial general liability field. And then again, you have your same policy number showing for your GL as well as the rented equipment policies. Other red flags that I wanted to mention, just again reminding you that if you see multiple email addresses on an application, on the pickup arrangements, whatever it may be, if you see multiple email addresses, that should be a red flag from a communication standpoint. Also, if you see multiple addresses, so driver's license or other photo ID has one address, then the application has another address. And if some of the references have similar addresses, you really just take a moment and put eyes on this information. You can use Google Earth to see what these addresses are. We have actually seen where an address is a vacant lot, or it's a UPS store, or maybe it's an apartment building, but yet the address doesn't include an apartment. So those are quick searches you can do yourself. Again, taking the time to do that. I know someone said you can use social media to vet some of these new clients, and you can. But what I found in the instances of these fake COIs, when I Googled the broker that was listed, the first hit was that broker. As I scrolled down, there were no other hits for that broker. And so, yes, you can do your searches, but take some time to look at the results and compare them and actually see what kind of information is coming up. Another thing that I would suggest, as Glenn and I think Scott even mentioned, courier service. Right there, I think that's the done deal. That's when you say, sorry, we're not interested, or we can't help you, or however you'd like to turn them away. I just think that's going to be the ultimate red flag, if you will, as far as these new customers making those arrangements, because they typically are sending someone else to do the pickup than has been part of the process so far. And at times that'll be a last minute arrangement. They'll call and they'll say, oh, we can't make it, but we're sending so-and-so to pick it up. That should be a sign that there's something suspicious going on.
we actually had one where somebody said, I missed my flight and, could you send the equipment here? So whenever there's an emergency, the
Yes.
key is just slow it down. In that situation, you could have said, well, then I'll deliver the gear to you myself, but I wouldn't even do that, until you really knew. Whenever you have another alternative is if you have somebody unknown to you, make them hire a local crew person that you do know and put that person in charge of the gear. I mean, there are workarounds.
Amy, we
Yes.
had a question in the chat. Why is replacement cost or actual cost of red flag on the COI?
Well, I answered it. It would
Oh, you
either
did.
usually say replacement cost or actual cash value. It's going to be one or the other usually as the valuation, or it would be, in some instances, it would say replacement cost not to exceed actual cash value until replaced. But that's the terminology that you would usually see. You also saw there was wording authorized to be an additional insured. You never see that on a certificate of insurance. You either see additional insured as their interest may appear and or loss payee. It doesn't say authorized. So you just have to look at the terminology. I mean, if you really think about it, I'd say 70% of the insurance certificates probably can't come from the same brokers over and over and over and over and over again. So just pull out a whole bunch of them, spread them out on your desk and say, does the wording look similar?
So let's open it up to questions, right? And
Yes.
do we want to? I'm just going to let everybody unmute themselves if they want to, but you can just put the questions in the chat, and we'll all watch the chat. I was thinking the same thing. Can we put together a PDF of all the red flags to watch out for on COIs? That's a nice idea.
We can do that. One of the things as I look at some of the wording on these certificates of insurance, whoever is creating these actually knows the name of insurance companies, because in one instance, even though we blocked out the insurance company name, it had the insurance company code number to the right of that, and that happened to be correct. One of them used the terminology worldwide, including transit and unnamed location. There's no unattended auto theft exclusion. So these people aren't working in a vacuum. I wonder if they're even connected to our industry. But yes, we could put together, one of the things we could put together is the name of the carriers that routinely write insurance, for entertainment accounts. And you could put down their policy prefix numbers, which tend to be over and over and over again, the same prefixes, but it doesn't mean that whoever's watching this will figure that out, and, just quickly adopt whatever they're doing to incorporate that into their scheme. The only way I figured out really to vet people that are unknown to you is through an independent third party. Because no matter what we do, and as we adopt to whatever they're doing, they're just going to keep changing. Like my comment on social media, right? The one way to find out is if they're real is look at their social media, right? Because if they don't have social media and this is the business they're in, they're probably not real. But then they'll just go steal other content and put that as their social media.
Mhm.
You either have to know somebody who knows them, or you have to get somebody to figure out if they're real. So somebody put in, why can't we make it the insurance company's responsibility to verify a policy that when they write it? So just as the person's coming to you, right? Most insurance brokers have no way to vet whether that person is real or not. And one of the things I thought about is that the insurance broker, right, could charge the $99, private investigative fee, but there's no way for the insurance broker really to give back the credit, because in many instances, if it's a short-term policy, the $99 is going to exceed their commission, right? So, and then you say, well, isn't it in the insurance company's interest to make sure that they know who their customer is so that they don't pay a claim if the person steals the equipment? But if the person who is the named insured steals the equipment, the insurance policy that they bought will not pay that claim because you can't steal from yourself. So in those instances, they would have to rely, the rental house would have to rely on their own insurance coverage, right? And they would hope that their policy does not have either a voluntary parting, or conversion exclusion in that policy. Because if a rental house has either of those two exclusions, then the rental house won't collect on their own insurance policy either if they voluntarily packed up the gear and handed it over to somebody who ended up stealing it from them. It says Denny Claremont used to have a 5-day waiting period for new customers. That disappeared. And that alone made a lot of them go away. And in line with that comment, the goal is to do business with people that are real and to put enough hurdles in the way of somebody who's not real where they don't stay around and they just go somewhere else. Again, not that we want to direct them to one of your competitors, but we just don't want them to steal your equipment.
There was a comment earlier from Sophia, and I was confused about this too. Can you review the timestamp red flag again? I missed that one.
Oh,
The
sure.
timestamp- Good.
Oh, no, there was one certificate that someone received where the effective date and time, so the time is typically going to be midnight to 12:01 a.m. And in this case, it said 5:47 p.m. And then the expiration was the usual time that you'd see on the certificate.
But it was actually 12:01 of the same day. So the expiration was before the effective date on that certificate.
Oh, I thought they had the year right, but yes, definitely look at the effective date and time.
So let's see, Denny Claremont, we require at least 48 hours to vet. We turn away Friday afternoons. That's a good practice. Regarding fraudulent certificates of insurance, forgive me if this was covered earlier. Just don't call the number on the COI. Look up the insurance company, find their real website and call the main number. That way you get through to the real agent, not the impersonator. In one of the certificates of insurance, I think they had the real name of somebody at the insurance company, but they had the gender wrong. Right, Amy? Because you ended up tracking down that person. So all these insurance companies have what they call special investigative units where they investigate suspicious activity, but most of their investigations involve their insured themselves versus a customer of the insured. One of the things I was trying to do was to get the investigative units of the major insurance carriers that write this type of coverage to have a phone number where a rental house could call that number and they could ask two questions. Is the policy number real? And does the policy number match the customer on my certificate of insurance? And if they could say yes to both of those, that would probably be extremely helpful. The issue is only one of the carriers thus far has responded in the affirmative, and they happen to be in a carrier that hasn't been involved in any of the rent to steal schemes. Let's see. It's not fully related, but can you explain what to look for with auto insurance coverage? Some certificates of insurance list that are physical damage is not covered. Others do not have a second page listing this specific coverage. So I'm guessing you're renting out vehicles? So if you're renting out vehicles, right, you're going to want to make sure that they have non-owned and hired automobile liability, and you're going to want to make sure they have hired vehicle physical damage. But more importantly, to what exists on the certificate of insurance, you're going to want to have contract in your rental agreement, listing your insurance requirements, and you're probably going to want to state that the customer's insurance is issued on a primary non-contributory basis. please make a video of this meeting available. I believe Harry's recording it.
I think so.
Yeah, that's right. It'll be available on our YouTube channel, and I'll send everybody the link.
You know, the thieves have just gotten very sophisticated, and, you know, the equipment is high dollar equipment. It's in high demand, and the police seem to have no interest in property crimes. So it's, you know, I know of one person that's stolen probably between $4 and $5 million worth of stuff over the last 5 years. You know, and that's a lot of money. You know, that's a lot of value to have been able to steal. You know, and so far there've been no consequences.
There's some questions in the chat with regard to
Oh, sorry. You got to keep scrolling down.
short-term policies being a red flag.
You know, so I used to think, right, that the short-term policies, there was a period of time where the short-term policies were the red flag, right? Very short period of time, because I think those people figured out that it was a red flag, and then they just started buying annual policies, which took that flag away. So I'm not so certain. I think it's more if you don't recognize the insurance company name as a carrier that regularly does business in this world, although 3 of the certificates we showed you today were all carriers that work in this space. One of the other things that you got to be aware of, you know, it's a little bit off topic. There are production companies that buy insurance and then they sell their insurance online to other production companies on a short-term basis. And usually the email to the rental house would be, you know, we're doing a co-venture or joint project with this production company, but make sure the rental contract is in the name of that other production company, and make sure you understand you're only to look for payment from that production company. So the red flag there, you know, really shows you that they've bought insurance and they're reselling their insurance. Whoever's doing it is usually not licensed to sell insurance. The one time that I'm aware of where the insurance company knew that this was happening, it was in the state of California. They eventually issued a cease and desist letter to that production company and said you were no longer allowed to sell insurance, and that program went away. But that's another way that people are renting gear without having the proper insurance. And in the event of a claim, we've had 2 instances more recently, not where somebody was reselling their insurance knowingly, but where people lent out their insurance, right? And the insurance company, I'm guessing, figured it out because they didn't pay either one of those claims, and we ended up having to pay those claims through the rental house.
Scott, there's a question from Gaston Fazio about the correct approach to reject a potential renter or new customer.
I think the easiest way to reject a new customer that you're suspicious of is we don't have the gear available. That's the easiest conversation to have. You know, we've had a couple of rental houses where they want to do stings, where they want the person to come in and they want to catch them. Unless you have law enforcement present when that occurs, you know, that could be dangerous. So the easiest way is not to have them come to your building.
Exactly. And then Dan asked about what types of gear is popular. Well, unfortunately, if you read all the rental guard alerts from the last, 6 months or so, you'll see what's been moving, and it's lenses.
Lenses.
Yes. And one thing I didn't mention that I should is there have been instances where someone will say, hey, this showed up on eBay or it's in a pawn shop. And we will alert, I have contacts with the different carriers, we'll alert them. If we know it's a paid claim, we'll contact the adjuster and let them know. If the authorities are involved, we'll certainly let them know. But it is a process, and whether it's ultimately recovered, taken in as evidence, or there are instances where then it turns into salvage for the carrier. It just, again, it's so time consuming. Anyone who's been there can tell you that, and it doesn't move nearly as quickly as we'd like. We even had a situation where the police recovered a set of lenses only to turn them over to the renter who had rented with the intent to steal. So that was the ultimate.
In Atlanta, there'd been 41 break-ins. I think it was 41 break-ins over a short period of time. And there we were finally able to get the police involved, but it took a gargantuan amount of effort on behalf of the entire rental community. It took, reaching out to the Atlanta Police Foundation. It took reaching out to the film commissioner, the governor's office. And once it finally got broadcast on television, because Atlanta, Georgia is one of the states where they have a tax credit and didn't make it look good, they finally applied the resources to solving the problem. And they did get arrests. And I'm not going to say anything more, because if I say anything more, Amy will say I brought on bad luck.
That's right. Thank you. And again, Glen's, as someone asked about the turnaround time for Glen's work, and he had said ideally a business day at max. So the Friday afternoons would be tough from West Coast to East Coast, but if it's during the week and you get it over to him, they'll make it a priority to do their searches.
I'm looking at another question. Business personal property. Business personal property is usually limited to the location listed in the in the insurance policy. So, business personal property is not what you're looking for. You're looking for either an inland marine policy, including transit and unnamed locations, or you're looking for miscellaneous equipment, which is a terminology used in the film production package policies and equipment and rental house policies. Just a note on rental guard, 1% recommended. I don't know.
Oh, just how great of a tool it is.
Rental house is a great tool. I mean, if people really pay attention and there's no cost to getting the missing equipment alerts, you could sign up everybody in your company. It's a great free resource. The better resource, right, is the new customer inquiry and the suspicious customer alerts, but you have to be a member in order to have access to those. Miscellaneous equipment, all risk policies, that's usually what you're looking for, but some of them may have an unattended vehicle theft exclusion. Some of them may not have a worldwide territory, might be limited to the United States or the United States and Canada. Some of them may require visible signs of entry in order for theft from an unattended vehicle to be covered. And it's interesting, years ago, they used to have those vans that had that triangle window where it was easy to push the window open, reach around, unlock the vehicle, and there was no barrier between the front of the truck and the back. You could just walk in and steal the stuff. And there were tons of claims like that. You could also slim jim the lock and get into the vehicle without any visible signs of entry. So there's one company out there that does have require the visible signs of entry. And again, the goal is not to say anything negative about any broker, any insurance program, any insurance carrier, because we want everybody pulling in the same direction to try to improve, our processes, both on the broker side, the carrier side, and the equipment rental company side, to avoid more of these claims from happening again in the future.
The red flag with policy numbers, it's mostly with the general liability. So when you see the same policy number listed for the general liability as the inland marine or production package, those typically would not be the same policy numbers. You'd
There's
have
one
a
exception
unique
to that statement. One carrier uses the same throughout.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying one carrier does, but most of the time it's a different number.
And which carrier is that? Can we tell them or? Okay, so that,
I don't
right.
want to stay away from carriers, brokers, and anything,
Okay.
But what we'll do is we'll do a cheat sheet where we'll give you policy prefixes. But again, that's only as good until, somebody gets a copy of that sheet and then just uses that as information against us.
Yes.
We're coming
Also,
up on
Amy,
an hour.
just to add, a red flag is exactly what it is, a red flag. It's something you should pay attention to, you should look at. It doesn't necessarily exclude somebody on itself. It's just, one of many things that should alert you to maybe something more to look at.
I mean, the questions are coming in. So let's see, how do you know difference between a company, a co-production company, and a company who's selling insurance to another production company? You really don't know. I mean, in two instances, right? Everything looked real until the claim went in, and then there was something that we don't know that occurred either between the production company and their insurance company, the type of productions that were covered underneath that production package policy, or whether they lent their insurance to somebody. And unfortunately, in that instance, you're not going to know until there's a claim. In terms of where people are selling their insurance, where I've seen it, they usually do that co-production arrangement. So as long as the insurance, the rental contract, and the payment all is coming from the same source, right? And there's no other name there, again, it's not a guarantee, but it's your best guess that you're dealing with somebody who actually bought the insurance to cover that production versus buying the insurance from somebody else that was selling it to them. And there are many instances, if you call a broker, right, without the customer on the phone, the broker's not going to talk to you, right? Because
And the same with the carriers.
the carrier, they don't know you from Adam. So getting the special investigative unit to try to confirm two pieces of information is, a big leap. Going back to what I said earlier, at the very beginning, these thefts, it's not that you have to be hyper focused on everybody that's renting from you. You have to be hyper focused on those customers where the greatest number of rent to steal types of claims are occurring. So if you have a television commercial production company that you've been doing business with, for 20 years, and you have all their contact information and their emails in your database, that's not something to worry about other than whether they have the correct insurance. It's really and again, it doesn't really happen in the episodic television world, feature film world. It happens more where somebody's not even renting the entire package from you. It happens when somebody's renting specific pieces of equipment from you on a short-term basis. And, and the ones that again, probably not a problem, just vet the insurance. It's on the ones where you don't know them, right? Where you have to really drill down.
Are there certain wording to look for or anything to specifically ask for? And I think that's
again, we could give you a sample certificate of insurance, right? It's easy for us to do that, right? The problem is once somebody who has bad intentions gets a copy, we've just given them the roadmap of how to trick you. But we give them out all the time.
Should the COI have a second page so we can see their forms and exclusions?
Some certificates of insurance do have a second page. So a certificate of insurance is not meant as a replacement for the carrier, for the coverage, or the policy. It's really designed to give you a best guess what might exist in the underlying insurance policy. A certificate of insurance, if you read it in and of itself, does nothing, right? Other than give you information. But it doesn't guarantee coverage. It doesn't extend coverage. It's the policy that provides all the coverage.
But if Luke Skywalker is typing up the COI, then
like one of the things on those certificates of insurance, they put the email address underneath the production company name. That's not something that you typically see on a certificate of insurance. So there were tons of red flags on those three. The minute we sent those to the carriers, to their special investigative units, the fire alarm went off. God, what has somebody done, right?
So Scott, someone did ask the question, should they not send new potential clients sample COIs?
I would still give people the sample certificates of insurance because otherwise you're just going to have a back and forth that's going to be never ending. I think the answer is find somebody that knows them, that and you trust, or get a third party to verify you're dealing with somebody real. I think the top the number one priority when you're dealing with somebody you don't know is verifying that they're real. I even think, and I can't believe I'm going to say that, their insurance is secondary to that, right? Because if you're dealing with somebody that's not real, the rest of it's going to be fake. If you're dealing with somebody that's real, their insurance may not be perfect, but at least you know they're not going to steal the stuff from you.
There's a comment here. Some COIs have a verification barcode.
Yeah, I would be cautious with that as well,
I
because
never
if
saw
you
that.
scan it, that could be depending on, if you haven't verified the renter, I would say be careful or cautious of scanning any or downloading anything.
So if there's a theft where the gear goes outside the US, I would assume it is not covered.
No, you have to find the territory. Most of the production package policies tend to be worldwide, but not all of them are. Most of them tend to be worldwide, but not all of them are. So if you're sending stuff out of the US and Canada, right, or out of the US, you just have to ask those questions. And you're like in one state, you're not even allowed to ask the questions. You're not allowed to ask the information to be on a certificate of insurance. In that one state, they just passed the law more recently. You've got to ask them to just send you that section of the policy. They're allowed to do that.
What about inland marine? I guess that's
Inland marine, again, usually will mean inland marine means it's traveling. But when it says inland, right, it means it's traveling inland. So in its most basic form, it doesn't cover while it's traveling over water, right? But many inland marine policies have worldwide policy territories. Not all of them.
Is anyone familiar with Wrapbook and their services for the industry?
I think they're just a broker, just like all of us that sell insurance, but I think they also do payroll. They do both. But again, let's stay away from individual names, right? We want everybody pulling in the same direction. I did another seminar for the AICP on a very, very hot topic, one which involved litigation. And the key there, again, was stay away from names of carriers, stay away from the names of customers, stay away from the names of brokers, because in order to get the industry to fix it, everybody had to be pulling in the same direction and nobody could feel like somebody was trying to embarrass them or blame them.
Trade references. Can you talk about guidelines for vetting trade references? Such as it needs to be a vendor or business they have worked with, not just an individual. Are there any other tips, red flags, etc.? I'll just mention that there's a we have now on you can download it from Rental Guard. There's a Scott came up with a updated list of sort of red flag vetting list just I guess a month ago, right? Let's see if I can put the.
So there's another scheme that occurred, years ago where somebody would rent equipment, small amount of equipment, return it, rent more equipment, and then return it, and then rent the mother load of equipment, and then just abscond. So just because you've dealt with somebody before doesn't necessarily, mean that it's all good. Some of the things you could ask to see, although nobody really does it, is let me see productions that you've shot, right? Let me see the work that you've done. I remember, going back to the Claremont days, a camera had gotten stolen from them, which was a high value film camera. And it was used on a production that had zero budget. And then the equipment got stolen from that production. And that right then and there was a red flag. And Terry, being Terry, was relentless. He knew somebody connected to the LAPD, and we eventually got that camera back. But you've got to ask, does the equipment that they're asking to rent match what they're intending to use with the gear? And what kind of work have they done that it's not on their website that you could verify independently has been broadcast? Well, we still have almost the same number of people that were there in the beginning. So I guess that's a good sign. We didn't bore you to death. We probably have your head throbbing with, God, how am I going to do this?
The gear often does go overseas, but we have, like I said, some clients have alerted us to listings on eBay, pawn shops outside of Atlanta, pawn shops, in the LA area. So I think it depends on what it is and where the demand is. But years ago, we were involved in something where a lot of stolen gears showed up in South America. Then we know there's a market overseas. So it just depends, I think, on who it is, the perpetrators, and then also the demand.
I think the person had a 10-year career in New York City. All their gear ended up in South America.
Mhm.
It was almost steel to order.
And with the broker and insurance carrier questions, again, just be leery because these certs now have fake broker information and the perpetrators are answering those verification calls and emails. The insurance carriers, you can probably look on their website, but they're not going to be likely to give out policy information if you were to just cold call them.
But the insurance company website would be a good point
Yes.
of resource for an authorized insurance broker. They would have the brokers that are authorized to sell their product on the website. But that doesn't necessarily work with a broker that's not, that's accessing what we call a wholesaler. They don't have direct access to the insurance company. They have to go through another broker to get access to that. But the insurance company websites would be a good starting point to find out at least if the broker's authorized and the correct information on the broker. Oh, so somebody's back to the one broker. Yeah, they do sell insurance. So even though it's not on their website.
Yeah,
I
someone
think,
was asking.
I think that's it then.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Amy and Glenn and Scott, for doing this. Really appreciate your time and expertise on this. I think there was a lot of really informative stuff in there. Clearly, it's a bottomless. But thanks so much for this. Thanks everybody for attending this morning.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you,
Thank you.
Harry.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Glenn.
Thank you, Amy, Scott, Harry,
Thank you.
attendees.
Thanks very much.